Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Portal to the Infinite, your guide for humanity's ascension. I'm Brian, and welcome today. And if you like and resonate with this content, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to this channel, and maybe share it with somebody you think may find this content interesting. Also, you can follow me on Twitter X. My handle there is AwakenedSoul71. I'll leave that, of course, in the description box below. And by the way, don't bother visiting the website that you see on the screen where it says www.portaltotheinfinite.net because I haven't set it up yet. We're so new to this. It's a small channel. I really don't share this. I don't try to market it. I'm letting it grow on its own. So those of you who are listening, you are the pioneers of this channel, and I appreciate it. I really do. Now, yesterday was episode 3, and we talked about how to begin your spiritual path. And as I said, there are no rules, no tenets. This is not a religion. And that's the problem. We're so used to religion that we confuse man-made religious doctrine with our natural state of being. So if you missed that and you'd like to get some ideas of I share with you my experiences in the hopes that they'll inspire you to find your own experiences. I don't expect anybody to take what I say as a doctrine. I don't expect you, unless you want to use anything I say in your own personal spiritual path. Just as I've walked my whole spiritual path, I've taken things that resonate from one source to another, one book, one individual, one podcast, whatever it may be, and I take what resonates. So that's what I always tell you, take what resonates. Now, today, we're going to talk. I like to, jump right in. I try to keep these short, folks. But today, I want to talk about one of the biggest mysteries. Well, not for everyone. Certainly not for me anymore. What happens after we die? Is there life after death? So, it's a heck of a topic, right? And it's a very extensive topic. And I've been, part of my spiritual path has been coming to grips with the answer to this question. And when I was a kid, I had no idea. I think nobody does about, you couldn't even imagine death, much less you're taught that, you go into a soul sleep and you're resurrected at the end. Some you may go on to heaven, eternal life, others to eternal damnation. And that just never really jived with me. It just didn't make sense. And now, knowing what I know, it definitely didn't make any sense. But, so let's first begin with the definitions, because so much of our language, we define specific words based upon our common knowledge and our knowledge up until now. And I believe we're going to have to change the definitions to these words as we move forward. So first of all, what is death? Well, death is the cessation of life. So what does death include? Well, everything that's alive on this planet right now, and that's not just us, that's animals, trees, flowers, bacteria, you name it, everything is going to die. So what does that mean? Is life meaningless? Well, I remember, people fear death. That's the biggest fear, of course, is death. Everybody doesn't know, or they hope, they have no idea. They're very fearful about the idea of the end of their life. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is no end to your life. There may be the end to your earthly experience in this realm, but there's certainly no end to your life. Now, how do we know this? Well, there's actually tons of information out there, and I'm going to speak specifically about two different things, one of which I have, both of which I'm now personally acquainted with, but one of which I can personally share my experience. Now, there's an association, an international organization that's called the IANDS, and that stands for the International Association of Near-Death Studies. This was founded in 1978 by doctors and scientists, one of whom was Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote the book and coined the term near-death experience back in the early 70s. He began to notice, as had many other doctors, that people who were being resuscitated, if you died on the operating table or they were brought in from an accident and they were deceased and they performed heart resuscitation, CPR on them, and they came back. But they would come back with amazing stories about what they experienced while they were gone. So doctors began to find this very interesting because when they started communicating with each other, when these groups of scientists and doctors started to communicate, they realized that there was a common theme that went through all of these experiences. And that these experiences, of course, number one, they were global. But number two, they were irrespective of the person's culture or religion, and that they would happen to even atheists, people who profess not to believe in anything. And they found it fascinating because they said, wow, this is interesting. We may have something here, because science has always struggled. It can't study something that it cannot measure. And they will consider all of these anecdotal stories, no matter how many millions of them we have now. So the IONS organization, which I've been familiar with them probably for 15 years, maybe longer, I actually joined them last May. And the reason I joined is because I was interested in starting a local IONS meeting group. And I actually first was interested in joining one. And so I went on their site, and I checked to see if there were any in New Jersey. There were not. Now, there's one in New York, which is brand new, New York City, and they have them all over the world. So I said, well, maybe I should start one. So I did. I called and spoke to a very lovely person on the phone, and she referred me to a gentleman who's in charge of handling all of this, the groups. And he and I spoke. We had a wonderful conversation. His name is Evan. And we hit it off. We shared not only the same beliefs, but the same philosophies, the same spiritual philosophies. Because one of the greatest things that they've discovered from everyone who came back is that they became spiritual. Even if they were very religious, they kind of dropped their religion and just became spiritual. Because they had experienced something so profound that it changed their entire outlook on life. And first of all, they never feared death. They also wanted to go back. Most people didn't want to come back here because they felt that where they was their true home. And that this experience in this flesh that we have, this heavy, low, dense experience called 3D living on Earth, this is not our home. Now, this is not me saying this. This is what people report. So I haven't had the first meeting here yet, but I put some feelers out on my Facebook. And amazingly, I got great response, but even more amazing is that two of the people whom I know had near-death experiences, and I didn't know that. I can't wait to hear all about them. One of whom was a cardiac patient. She was in cardiac arrest, and she wrote me, she says, I'd love to come. 25 years ago, I went into cardiac arrest, and I crossed over. And she said that when she had come back, her doctor asked her. Now, that was 25 years ago, which is amazing to me because 25 years ago, nobody was talking about this. And I find now that so many hospitals across the country have a policy now of interviewing people who were resuscitated to ask them, what did you see? Did you go anywhere? What was your experience? Now, not every experience is exactly the same, but they do share common themes. So, for instance, it begins with an out-of-body experience. Let's say, and this is very common, somebody dies on the operating table or in a hospital. The first thing they realize, and this is the person who, quote-unquote, died, even though the body died, they didn't. And this is how they realized this. It would start off with an out-of-body experience, and I'm going to talk about those in a little bit too, because they are connected. And a person would see themselves on the table. They'd be floating above, and they'd be looking down, and they'd see themselves on the table. And it takes some people a little bit of time to figure out that, wait a minute, that's me on the table. But how could that be me when I'm here? And they would be able to hear the conversations of the doctors going on in the room. And usually, of course, it was chaotic because the person just died. And when I say they died, that's it. They flatlined, meaning once your heart stops, your brain activity ceases. It's you just flatline. And people then would often be able to, when they would come back, they would tell the doctors what they heard them say. They would also know about conversations that were happening not in that room, maybe in another area of the hospital about them, like loved ones in the waiting room or whatever it may be, which, of course, that's physically impossible. From there, Generally, they would see a small light start to appear in a corner on their right or on their left, and they were naturally drawn to it. They would then, that room would fade away, and they would feel themselves going up. They were very light. They felt lightness, not heaviness. They felt great, as a matter of fact, the best they've ever felt. And they go into this quote-unquote tunnel, which, whether it's a wormhole or whatever it is, it's a way of getting from one frequency, because that's what this is. This world is a frequency, and there are really infinite frequencies to transcend to. But they would go through this tunnel, and generally they would come out, and they would be greeted by someone or a group of people. Now, that could have been a greeting from a deceased loved one, who obviously is not deceased at that point, or a light being, a robed figure. Some people see Jesus. Some people have encountered the Buddha. And it really just it's like what you expected to see. Well, that's what you see. And they would describe the place as being absolutely beyond words, with colors that their eyes had never seen, so they couldn't describe them. Sounds that their ears had never heard, so they couldn't describe those either. The most beautiful music, angelic music, that would be singing through all of the beautiful flowers and the trees. And there would be people, all sorts of people. And sometimes they would be reunited with their whole family. Other times they may take a quick tour. But other times there's this thing called the life review. Now, not everybody who's had an NDE has had a life review. But those who had describe it as the following. In what seems like an amazing technology that obviously we don't have yet, it's as if they stepped into a holograph where they were able to see everything they ever did throughout their lives. And of course, if you lived 80 years, it's not going to take you 80 years to go through this. And remember what I've told you, there is no time outside of this earth existence. Time is necessary here in order to create experiences. There's yesterday, there's today, and then there's tomorrow. But there's eternity there. So they would go through this life experience, but here's the catch, and here's what they all say, those who have had this experience. That they had to experience the good and the bad, but they had to experience how the other people or persons felt when you either hurt them or when you did them something good. So if you were nasty or mean to someone or to people, you had to then feel the emotions of the people on the other end of that nastiness, those to whom you were nasty. That's pretty amazing to me. And it really opens up the awareness how our words and our deeds are impacting not only others, but also ourselves, because we are all one. That's why you can't hate people, folks. Hating is useless. It only destroys you. So they all have this amazing experience. And as I said, not everybody has the life review, but I'd say about, I don't want to say the percentage of it. I've read it, but it's a good deal of them. And then generally, they could have a conversation. Sometimes they'll be there for what seems like when they come back, they'll say, oh my God, I felt like I was there for months, even though it may have been only 10 minutes in our Earth time here. Because the experience of the time that they had there was not actual time. It was the experience of what took place outside of time. And so generally they're then told, well, this is not your time. And you can go back. Some of them are told they have to go back. Some are given a choice. Now, those who are given a choice generally come back, even though they didn't want to. They come back because they have either unfinished business, which is why they're told they should go back, or they have children, and they don't want to leave their children behind. So they come back. And by the way, there have been some stories. Some people have been dead so long they were in the morgue, and they've come back, which defies science, again, because the brain can only go about 6 minutes without oxygen before, brain damage ensues. So that's miraculous. So they come back, and they are completely changed. And I have, over the years, and I'm not exaggerating because it's been at least a decade or more that I've been studying this, I've read or listened to or watched at least 1,000 testimonies from people who have died and come back. And so that's why doctors around the world and scientists are saying, well, there's evidence of something. We just don't know what that is because we can't measure this. But anyway, that doesn't mean it's not happening. And the fact that it is cross-cultural, it is across religious lines, and includes even former atheists, because they're no longer atheists at that point. But they all say it was the greatest, it was the most beautiful experience, that they can't even put it into words. That they felt light, they felt beautiful, they felt perfect, and they felt that they were at home. So those are near-death experiences. But what about out-of-body experiences? Sometimes, many people, in fact, more today seem to be speaking about it, have out-of-body experiences that have absolutely nothing to do with dying. It usually happens when you're sleeping. You generally it doesn't have to be this way, but you could awaken into sleep paralysis. Now, sleep paralysis is a known scientific phenomenon. And that's basically because when we sleep, our brain shuts off contact with our body so we don't act out our dreams. So you could be in sleep paralysis, and all of a sudden you feel yourself rising, levitating out of your body. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is, number one, because I began having these experiences when I was a senior in high school. I didn't know what they were. There was no internet to go and research them. I didn't even know how to describe them. And I really didn't, frankly, want to say anything because, you just didn't talk about these things years ago. Now you can. They're all over YouTube. There are channels dedicated specifically to out-of-body travel. But I first started discovering what it was in the late 90s when, of course, we had internet, when I first learned about the Monroe Institute down in Virginia, founded by Dr. Robert Monroe, who wrote several books. Now, Dr. Monroe was an entrepreneur. He was a radio engineer, a businessman. He was not spiritual at all. And this is going back to the late 50s. He was a scientist. And he began studying the use of using frequency and tones in each ear to try to alter our brain waves. It later became, as he calls it, he's in spirit now, it became called hemisync. And that's where you put, they're all over YouTube too. You can look them up. Binaural beats is what they are. That's where you have one tone in what you put headphones on. You have one tone in one ear, a different tone in the other ear, and your mind automatically creates a third tone, but it balances and harmonizes the hemispheres of your brain. And when he was experimenting with this one day, all of a sudden he feels himself rising. Next thing he knows, he sees the ceiling. And he didn't understand what was happening because, again, remember, he's a scientist. He had no spirituality in him, and nobody had heard anything about this, at least in modern times. So another night, he's in bed with his wife, sleeping in the middle of the night, and he opens up. It's not his physical eyes. It's his, astral body eyes. He opens up, and he sees down. He sees two people lying in a bed, one of whom is his wife, and there's another man. And for a second, he's like, who's this man sleeping with my wife? And he realized it was he in bed. So this, of course, had happened several times, and he thought he was, something was wrong with him. He thought maybe he had had a stroke or there was something wrong with his mind. So being a scientist, being a businessman, he had several friends who were doctors, physicians. And he had conversations with them both, two of them, separately, explained everything to them. And they examined him, and they said, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. He said, well, what do? I don't know what this is. And they said, well, just keep doing it and, see what you can learn from it. So he did. And he began to have amazing, amazing experiences, probably some of the most amazing experiences I've ever read. And he put them in several books, one of the first of which came out in the early 70s called Journeys Out of the Body. So I got that book in the late 90s when I realized about all of this, and I learned about the Monroe Institute, which still exists. But what's more amazing is I found out that the U.S. government sent intelligence officers to the Monroe Institute in the early 80s to learn, because they developed a protocol to actually help people be able to do out-of-body travel. And so they figured, the United States government, typical, figured, all right, maybe we could use this to spy on the Soviet Union, because back then they were still in existence. And so they did. There was a whole team of researchers who went there, one of whom was Ingo Swann, famous of them, and a whole bunch of gentlemen that all of whom I had read about and read their own books and learned what they had experienced and what they had seen. And you could actually go to the CIA website and read their declassified report on out-of-body. It's called the Gateway Experience, and it took place, of course, at the Monroe Institute. And within that CIA report, they basically say that reality is a holographic frequency, and that our physical brain is designed to tune into and interpret this frequency, which is what our brain is, because consciousness, which is our sense of self, it's who we are, it's what we are, it's how we exist, it's the point of focus, of creation in us. But scientists have never been able to say where consciousness comes from or how the brain creates it. Because now remember, scientists, at least Western scientists, they're all materialists, even though many of them are coming around now. They're not afraid to say it. But traditional mainstream science in the West has always been materialism. And as far as that is concerned, the scientists said, well, consciousness must be created by the brain because there's nothing else outside of it. So therefore, we just haven't figured it out yet. Well, here it is 50 years later. They still haven't figured it out. But what this report says and what quantum physicists say is that the brain doesn't create consciousness. It receives it. So in other words, to be able, it's like wearing your avatar. It's like putting on some type of suit. To be able to walk around in this holographic frequency and experience it in 3 dimensions with 5 senses. Well, how does the consciousness have the experience? The consciousness is received by the brain. Now, the brain maintains the body. The brain maintains the functions of the body. It's amazing what the brain can do. But your personality, your sense of self, and your memories, none of that are actually in your brain. The brain may form an ego net, but consciousness doesn't come from the brain. Consciousness is eternal, and that's the eternal part of you. Now, when you come out of body, you still have your body, but it's not your physical body. It's you can call it your spirit body. You can call it your light body. People call it your astral body, because this is also referred to as astral projection, but that, has a little bit of a woo-woo sound to it. So I like out of body better. And it's amazing. Now, and I started having these, as I said, my senior year of high school. Now, I did not have extensive travel. It wasn't until years later when I finally knew what it was, so that when it would happen, I would know what to do. And, I don't have the time right now. I'll save it for another episode. But the experiences were incredible. I have a physical body when I'm out of this physical body. It's physical in that frequency, because that's all it is. It's a change of frequency. Think of a radio. Think about how wherever you are, every single radio station exists around you. Can you see it? No, but it's there. So what do? You have to have a radio to tune in. You plug a radio in, turn it on, you can tune into a station. Now, if you change that station, you know how you go from one station to another, and there's a point where you'll hear half of one frequency, half of another? Well, that's exactly what happens when you're transitioning, whether you're leaving your body to have an out-of-body experience, or whether your physical body dies and you automatically then are out of your body. You're changing frequency. That's all it is. You're going into another frequency. And in that frequency, everything is as real there as it is here. We always have an idea that, it's misty and foggy and there's clouds and it's wispy and we're like a wisp of a shadow of white cloud or something like that. No. It's as real as here. The difference is this: it has different physics. So I'm solid there, but I could fly or I can glide. And if I want to walk, I can walk. I could either speak with my mouth or with telepathy. I can go through walls if I want, even though the walls feel solid. So there are different physics. Now, I can't tell you what those physics are. I have no idea. And my experiences were always rather short. I always know when I'm going back. I just feel it. And I'm like, here we go. Because I get so excited when I'm in those states because I want to explore, which is what Dr. Monroe did, which is why his book is, I guess I've had to live vicariously through his book to see these amazing experiences. So at the end of the day, what does all of this mean? The answer is there life after death? Well, apparently there's no such thing as life after death. It's just life. If we are eternal, there's no such thing as after, because that signifies time, by the way. And out of this realm, this 3D realm, there is no time. Quantum physicists will tell you that. The only thing that exists is the present moment. And that's what quantum physicists tell us. And we learn that through spirituality. Thousands of years ago, the great spiritual teachers taught this. They knew this. So we're actually in a day where science and spirituality are coming together in complement of one another, allowing us to begin to put a real framework toward who we are spiritually. What is it? What are we? Who are we? Do we go somewhere? You don't really go anywhere. You're always in one place. You change your point of focus. So your consciousness is no longer focused here in physical reality. It's focused in the next one. And wherever you go depends upon your personal vibration. Now, you have eternity. You can go anywhere. But people say, well, what happens with lousy, horrible people? Well, those people have to go through a life review, but they have a choice. That's the other important thing is to keep in mind that we all have a choice. That is free will, because we're each a part of the Creator. But because of that, the Creator cannot interfere in our choices and our free will. And I know that that's tough for some people to swallow, but that's just the way it is. And so that's what happens. We change frequency. We're forever changing We've been in who knows how many frequencies. And so people say, well, what about reincarnation? Well, that reincarnation, again, it indicates as if there was something in the past. There is no past. It's all an illusion. And again, can't wrap your head around that. I understand. You say, well, wait a minute. I have a past. I remember everything I did. Yeah, it exists now in your mind. So you have a choice. If you want to come back and quote unquote have another experience on this planet, you can. You want to not come back? You don't have to. You want to spend what seems like 1,000,000 years just kind of having spiritual experiences? But at some point, you're going to want to manifest as something else or incarnate as something else to have other experiences, because your soul is always seeking to grow and expand. And the only way to do that is to usually be in a place like this where there's a sense of time so that you could have an experience and learn from it. In other words, okay, I make this decision, I do this, that happens, and the only way that could happen is when you have time or the illusion of time. So there obviously is a continuance of our sense of self and our consciousness. There obviously is no death. Death is an illusion experienced by those who are left behind after the soul leaves its body. So if I die, everybody here is going to see it as, well, he died, because there's his body and, there's nothing in it. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't experience death, and neither will any of you. So there is no life after death. There's just life. Life. Always. Infinitely. Anyway, we're approaching the end, folks. I don't like to go long. If you have questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section. I love to read them, and I want to answer them because it's a small enough channel where I can do so now. And I look forward. I could talk more about this, and I do want to talk about some of my unique experiences. And I also want to talk about things that I've experienced throughout my 30 years, which really awakened me. I kept getting signs, and you're going to get that too if you want them. If your soul's path is to awaken, and it seems like today that is the path for most of the people on this planet. If you're just awakening now, and that's what I am here for you. I'm here to make your path easy and help you to understand some of these things so your mind can grasp these things, and that will change your consciousness. It will change your life. It will change the way you perceive and see life. So I look forward to that, and I'll see you again on episode, this is what, episode 3. I'll see you on episode 4. I have no idea what it's going to be about yet. I let Spirit dictate to me all the time what I should talk about, because I don't know what to talk about, but Spirit does. It knows what certain people need to hear, and he will also, or she, it, will align people with this information for the people who need to hear it. So anyway, until the next episode, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow on Twitter X, share, and just live and enjoy yourselves, folks. Life is meant to be fun. I'll I'll see you then. Take care, folks.